Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in this world. God bless you. This is Gloria White coming to you from Utah, USA. Today we are going to continue in the second book of Kings in the New Jerusalem Holy Bible, and we're going to pick up in chapter 21, verse 19. The reign of Amon in Judah, 642 to 640. Amon was 22 years old when he came to the throne, and he reigned for 2 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Meshullemeth, daughter of Haruz of Jotbah. He did what is displeasing to Yahweh, as Manasseh, his father, had done. In every respect he followed the example of his father, serving the idols which his father had served and worshiping them. He abandoned Yahweh, God of his ancestors. He did not follow the way of Yahweh. Amon's retinue plotted against the king and killed him in his own palace. The people of the country, however, slaughtered all those who had plotted against King Amon and proclaimed his son Joshua as his successor. The rest of the history of Amon, his entire career, is this not recorded in the book of the Annals of the Kings of Judah? He was buried in his father's tomb in the garden of Uzzah. His son Josiah succeeded him. Joshua and the religious reform. This is section C. Verse 22. Introduction to the reign of Josiah, 640 to 609. Josiah was 8 years old when he came to the throne, and he reigned for 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jedidah, daughter of Adiah of Bozkath. He did what Yahweh regards as right, and in every respect followed the example of his ancestor David, not deviating from it to the right or left. The book of the law discovered. In the 18th year of King Josiah, the king sent the secretary of Shaphan, son of Azaliah, son of Meshullam, to the temple of Yahweh. Go to Hilkiah the high priest, he told him, and tell him to melt down the silver contributed to the temple of Yahweh and collected by the guardians of the threshold from the people. He is to hand it over to the masters of works attached to the temple of Yahweh, for them to pay it over to men working on the temple of Yahweh, to repair the damaged parts of the temple, to the carpenters, builders, and masons, and for buying timber and dressed stone for the temple repairs. The latter were not required to render account of the money handed over to them, since they were conscientious in their work. The high priest Hilkiah said to Shaphan the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the temple of Yahweh. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, who read it. Shaphan the secretary went to the king, reporting furthermore to him as follows. Your servants have melted down the silver which was in the temple, and have handed it over to the masters of works attached to the temple of Yahweh. Then Shaphan the secretary informed the king, the priest Hilkiah has given me a book, and Shaphan read it aloud in the king's presence. The prophetess Huldah consulted. On hearing the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. Then the king gave the following order to the priest Hilkiah. Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Achbor, son of Micaiah, Shaphan the secretary, and Isaiah, the king's minister, go and consult Yahweh on behalf of me and the people about the words of the book that have been discovered. For Yahweh's furious wrath has been kindled against us, because our ancestors disobeyed the word of Yahweh by not doing what this book says they ought to have done. The priest Hilkiah, Ahikam, Achbor, Shaphan, and Asaiah went to the prophetess Huldah, wife of Shullam, son of Tikvah, son of Harhas, the keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the new town. They put the matter to her. She replied, Yahweh, God of Israel, says this. To the man who sent you to me, say this. Yahweh says this. I am going to bring disaster on this place and the people who live in it. All the words of the book read by the king of Judah, because they have abandoned me and sacrificed to other gods, so as to provoke my anger by their every action. My wrath is kindled against this place, and nothing can stop it. As for the king of Judah, who sent you to consult Yahweh, say this to him. As regards the words you have heard, but since your heart has been touched, and you have humbled yourself before Yahweh on hearing what I have decreed against this place, and the people who live in it, how they will become an object of horror and cursing, and have torn your clothes and wept before me. I too have heard, Yahweh says. So look, when I gather you to your ancestors, you will be gathered into your grave in peace. You will not live to see the great disaster that I am going to bring on this place. They took this answer to the king. The solemn reading of the law and renewal of the covenant. The king then had all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem summoned to him. And the king went up to the temple of Yahweh with all the people of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, priests, prophets, and the whole populace, high and low. In their hearing he read out the entire contents of the book of the covenant discovered in the temple of Yahweh. The king then, standing on the dais, bound himself by the covenant before Yahweh, to follow Yahweh and to keep his commandments, decrees, and laws with all his heart and soul, and to carry out the terms of the covenant as written in this book. All the people pledged their allegiance to the covenant. Religious reform in Judah. The king ordered Hilkiah with the priests next in rank and the guardians of the pages stuck together, excuse me. Is it stuck together? Let's see, 361. Nope. Okay, got it. All right, so religious reform in Judah. The king ordered Hilkiah with the priests next in rank and the guardians of the threshing old to remove all the cult objects which have been made for Baal, Asherah, and the whole array of heaven. He burnt them outside Jerusalem in the fields of the Kidron, and had the ashes taken to Bethel. He exterminated the spurious priests, whom the kings of Judah had appointed, and who offered sacrifice on the high places. In the towns of Judah and the neighborhood of Jerusalem, also those who offered sacrifice to Baal, to the sun, to the moon, the constellations, and the whole array of heaven. And from the temple of Yahweh he took the sacred pole outside Jerusalem to Kidron Valley, and in Kidron Valley he burnt it, reducing it to ashes, and throwing its ashes on the common burial ground. He pulled down the house of the sacred male prostitutes, which was in the temple of Yahweh, and where the women wove veils for Asherah. He brought all the priests in from the towns of Judah, and from Gibeon to Beersheba. He rendered unsanctified the high places where these priests had offered sacrifice. He pulled down the high place of the gates, which stood at the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, to the left of the entry to the city. The priests of the high places, however, did not officiate at the altar of Yahweh in Jerusalem, although they did share the unleavened bread of their brother priest. He rendered unsanctified Tophet in the valley of Hinnom, so that no one could pass his son or daughter through the fire to sacrifice to Molech. He destroyed the horses which the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun at the entrance to the temple of Yahweh, near the apartment of Nathan-Melech, the official, in the precincts, and he burned the solar chariot. The king pulled down altars which the kings of Judah had built on the roof, and those which Manasseh had built in the two courts of the temple of Yahweh, and broke them to pieces on the spot, throwing their rubble into the Kidron valley. The king rendered unsanctified the high places facing Jerusalem, to the south of the Mount of Olives, which King Solomon of Israel had built for Ashtar, the Sidonian abomination, for Chemosh, the Moabite abomination, and for Milcom, the Ammonite abomination. He also smashed the sacred pillars, cut down the sacred poles, and covered with human bones the places where they had stood. The reform is extended to the former northern kingdom. As for the altar which was at Bethel, the high place built by Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had led Israel into sin, he demolished this altar in this high place as well, in the same way, breaking up its stones and reducing them to powder. The sacred pole he burned. On looking round, Joshua saw the tombs there on the hillside. He had the bones fetched from the tombs and burned them on the altar. Then he rendered unsanctified, in accordance with the word of Yahweh, which the man of God had proclaimed when Jeroboam was standing by the altar at the time of the feast. On looking round, Joshua caught sight of the tomb of the man of God who had foretold these things. "What is that monument I see?" he asked. The townspeople replied, "It is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and foretold what you have done to the altar." "Let him rest," the king said, "and let no one disturb his bones." So they left his bones untouched, with the bones of the prophet who came from Samaria. Joshua also destroyed all the shrines on the high places which were in the towns of Samaria, and which the kings of Israel had built to provoke Yahweh's anger. He treated these places exactly as he had treated the ones at Bethel. All the priests of the high places who were there he slaughtered on the altars, and on those altars burned human bones. Then he returned to Jerusalem. The Passover. The king gave this order to the whole people: "Celebrate a Passover to Yahweh your God, as prescribed in this book of the covenant." No Passover like this had ever been celebrated since the days when the judges ruled Israel, nor throughout the entire period of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. The 18th year of King Josiah was the only time when such a Passover was celebrated in Yahweh's honor in Jerusalem. Final comments on the religious reform. What is more, the spirit guides and mediums, the household gods and idols, and all the abominations to be seen in the country of Judah and in Jerusalem were swept away by Josiah to give effect to the words of the law written in the book found by the priest Hilkiah in the temple of Yahweh. No king before him turned to Yahweh as he did, with all his heart, all his soul, all his strength, in perfect loyalty to the law of Moses, nor did any king like him arise again. Yet Yahweh did not renounce the heat of his great anger which had been roused against Judah by all the provocations which Manasseh had caused him. Yahweh said, I shall thrust Judah away from me too, as I have already thrust Israel. I shall cast off Jerusalem, this city which I have chosen, and the temple of which I had said, my name shall be there. And we'll stop there and pick up tomorrow. Looks like in chapter 23, verse 28, the end of the reign of Josiah. It's kind of confusing to me when I think that God is going to bring punishment on the people now under this King Josiah, when he has turned the people about and destroyed all the idols and poles and everything that was ungodly before the people. But when God says he's going to do something, he really doesn't relent. And he does what he says he's going to do. Just like in the book of Revelation, the things that he has said are going to come to pass are going to come to pass. So stay faithful, stand strong, and just know that he is still on the throne. And as always, I love you.